I was just talking to someone yesterday that I care a lot about and all of that, and she walked into she had gone to do something, get some groceries or something, came back in and was really angry and at the way somebody had rolled their eyes in a certain way and sent her some kind of a nonverbal message that they weren't approving of her or whatever. And I noticed an incredible change come over her. And I told her this later. I said, you looked older, you looked angrier, you looked mean, you had like a scowl, And I said, this isn't you at all. And I said, it's like at the moment that she was doing that way, I went over and instead of getting myself upset, which is what I would have done at an earlier time and saying, this is what I teach and how can you do that and blah, blah, blah. I went over and I put my arms around her. And I said, I love you. And I said, and I'm only telling you these things because I care so much about you. But these are the times, these are the moments when it's happening, when you need to practice what I live and what I teach and what we're all working on together. You need to be able to send love to those people who are sending you hateful messages, And that's what I would say to you. I think that's your greatest challenge. Now, that does not mean you have to be victimized if that hate is directed towards you,
Right.
Or if it manifests itself in some physical kind of way or something. You just simply walk away from that. They begin to get a real strong message that when I behave this way towards Dawn, then Dawn is leaving and heading for dusk. Dawn is gone. Now, if it's just an angry response, a prejudice response and something, those are the moments when if you can keep your ego out of it, and relate to that person and see that the hate that they are demonstrating or that, is really just a mind virus that they've carried with them that says that when somebody rolls their eyes or when somebody behaves in a certain way, that you have a right to get yourself all worked up and change the whole energy for anyone. That's a moment when you have to be almost overwhelmingly loving and let them know. I think that's another way that you deal with drug addicts. What I've learned over the years is when someone is, high on drugs and or drunk or whatever, is that you have to let them know, that I love you, but I don't take it in. I don't internalize it in any way because who I am is love. What I've learned is that it's not so important to be loving as much as it is to be love. Loving implies that you've got something to do. Love means that's all I have to give away. That's all I have to give away. And even when you behave in those kinds of ways, I love you, and after a while you see those kinds of things shift. Now, if that is directed at you, I used to say to my children, because children have this way of thinking that they can say any crappy thing they want to their parents, and then they're going to hang around because what are you going to do? They're still your kids.
Right.
But I used to always say to my kids, and I would say this to my husband if I were you, I have too much respect for myself to allow anyone to talk to me like that. And that's why I'm walking away, because it's counterintuitive to how I feel about myself. And I would always let them know that, if they raise their voice in frustration or in anger or whatever, not so much directed at me because just things weren't going right, their bicycle broke or, whatever. And it was always a favorite line of mine. I have too much respect for myself to allow you or anyone to talk to me in that way. And rather than get into a prolonged argument and getting angry and so on, I would just exit. I would just leave. Right. When you get angry at somebody for being angry, we have a tendency to believe that it is their anger and their way that they're behaving that caused me to go down and to get upset. But it isn't. When you get angry at somebody for being angry at you, you're only angry not because that low energy brought your high energy down, but because you joined their low energy. And all you did is multiply the amount of negative energy that's in the room. So now this person was angry, you were full of love, but in that moment now you're full. Now you've doubled the anger in the room. Right. Whereas, what we always said of Jesus, that, he would calibrate at such a high level that he would just enter a village. Everyone in the village's consciousness would be raised just by his presence. And I know that I have that capacity to do that. I know that not just with, say, a spouse, but I have the capacity to do that in a restaurant with a waiter or at an airport with an unruly, passenger or with somebody who's giving me a hard time at the desk or with a flight attendant or whatever it might be. I have the capacity to totally, completely change that around by sending out a different level of response to it, which means that if I am love, and it says in the New Testament, God is love. And so I'm saying I am God. I am a piece of God. And he that abideth in love abideth in me, and I in him. When you are able to just be love in response to that, you can diffuse it. You can literally diffuse it. And you just let them know, your behavior sends me away. Not with an argument, not with a long discussion. It sends me away. And after 4, 5, 6, 7 times of this, they start to do that and they realize, whoop, Dawn's heading out again. Why does she keep heading out every time I start behaving like such an or such a jerk, rather, and before you know it, you've taught them. Because you teach people with your behavior, and after a while, he realizes I may talk like this to other people and about other people, but it doesn't work with Dawn. It just doesn't work with Dawn. It just sends her away. And ultimately, if it continues and just unabated, then ultimately it sends you away completely, because you will not want to have to, constantly be spending your life just diffusing negative energy.